Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot Podcast. My name is Chris Hume, the managing editor here at the Lancaster Patriot, and I'm joined today by Godfrey Kyazze. Did I say it right?
Mm-hmm. Godfrey Kyazze.
Godfrey Kyazze. And Godfrey, you are a native of Uganda, correct?
Right.
Born and raised there?
Born, raised from Uganda. I'm a visitor usually here.
Okay. And for those who don't know, Uganda is on the continent of Africa. We have talked about Uganda on the past in this podcast, and it's great to have a Ugandan in here who can set us straight on what's going on over there.
All right.
But first, Godfrey, let's just talk a little bit about your background, what you're doing over there in Uganda, and you definitely evolved a lot in education, right? But before we even get there, we were just talking a moment ago about, you said you had a Roman Catholic background.
You'll excuse me, I have a cold.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we hope you get better from that soon. Hopefully, did you get that on the plane over here?
Not on the plane. It was developing right before I got on the plane, so it was bad timing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you raised Roman Catholic? Is that a big thing in Uganda?
Yes, I think statistics give us 85% Christian as a country.
Okay.
But majority of those are Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic are the majority, and then the Anglicans come second, and then you have these different evangelical groups. They are the ones that come thereafter. So there are many Roman Catholics definitely in Uganda. So my mom raising us up, her family, they were Roman Catholic.
Okay. When did you leave the Roman Catholic Church?
I got saved in 1997. I was just about to finish my high school. That's when the Lord saved me. And at that time, I'm raised by a single mom with 7 children. I'm the second last born, and I was the last one to get saved. So at the time I get saved, everyone else was, including my mom. Wow. She's still alive. She's 87 this year.
Praise the Lord. So all your siblings and your mom, now, are they part of Presbyterian Church now, or?
Not all of them are part of the Presbyterian Church. I am the Presbyterian, I and my family. In Uganda, even when I got saved into Pentecostalism.
Okay.
They're a big part of the evangelical groups, so they do quite a lot of work in terms of evangelism. So they are the ones that have reached out to so many people. So what happens, many people who are like in my situation, there are many people who would be like in my situation, where they come to know the Lord either through Pentecostalism, but over time, as they are discipled, they get to begin to choose their theological leanings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's the name of the Pentecostal Presbyterian denomination over there that you're part of?
It's not okay. I got saved through a Pentecostal.
Right, but now you're with the Presbyterian
denomination. Right now, I'm not Pentecostal.
Right, the Presbyterian.
It's Presbyterian.
Right, what's the name? Is it just Uganda, or is it overall of Africa, or how does it work?
It's a new, actually, presbytery, which we just put together. It's called the Reformed RCE, Reformed Churches of East Africa.
Okay.
Reformed Churches of East Africa. We just put it together a few years ago. I'm on the session of our own church, our local church.
Okay.
I'm one of the elders. So because we are so few churches, I happen as well to sit on the presbytery. So everything is still new. We're about 6 churches in Uganda.
Is there any outside Uganda?
We are working quite a lot in the East African region, that is with Kenya, with Rwanda, Burundi, some South Sudan. People are likely to come on board. Because what happened, there has been a PCU, Presbyterian Churches of Uganda, which has been there for years. Now, when our church was put together, or when it came together, there was a need again the leaders then began to realize there's need for another Presbyterian denomination, because there were issues with the PCU, which had been there, which possibly they were not kind of coming to terms with. So they felt a need to start another presbytery. Now, when they communicated that, they realized they were not the only church. There were a couple of other churches across the country and across the region that were in the same situation, that they needed another formation to kind of come together and form themselves as a new presbytery. So it's a common thing. There are many other in the region. When I talk about the region, East Africa, a number of countries around Uganda, they are beginning to pick interest in RCEA, in our presbytery. And pretty soon, I think many will be joining. And it will keep growing across.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we could talk about there. I know we want to move on to education, but just real quick, one more thing on that. So the Reformed faith in general, would you say that in Uganda there's an increased interest in that in general, just the Reformed theology and Reformed faith?
It is picking up. It's growing, because I'll mention this. I usually don't want to mention, but I'll mention this. The PCU, the Presbyterian Churches of Uganda, is meant to be reformed. And as well, I think if you look into their documents and everything, they're supposed to be reformed. And one of the major reasons why these other new churches, like our own church, New City Community Church, felt that there is need for another presbytery, is that the other PCU, where we would have been a part of, there are so many ways in which they no longer act as reformed, apart from having the reformed documents which speak that they are supposed to be reformed. And you give that to the Pentecostals, because Pentecostalism has become so huge in Africa that there are many groups which were even meant to be reformed that have been swallowed up over time. So myself, when I was just a new believer, I did not even know about all these ideas and these concepts being reformed, being non-reformed. They never meant anything, because the predominant gospel, if you would call it, that is being preached across Africa is Pentecostalism. And that's what people understand as being saved. Everyone there will tell you, I'm saved, that's all. What does it mean to be saved? Everything Pentecostals teach, that's what people think is what being Christian or being saved is supposed to be like. So there are many groups, even Baptists, that do not really have an understanding of what difference do they have as Baptists from the Pentecostals and what have you. And I think for good and for bad. For bad in the sense that people do not have an opportunity to appreciate the difference between some of these traditions. But for good in the sense that there is a semblance of unity, or a reception to the gospel, that the work I do when I go to reach out to people and I teach them some of these reformed ideals, people are very receptive. As long as they see something is in Scripture, they will take it on without taking on the label, whether it's reformed or non-reformed. Okay. People don't have much of that understanding.
Yeah, I could see how that could be a benefit. I know here in the States, seems to be a bit more, at least in some churches, hostility, if you will, to Reformed theology. Yeah. Just the label, oh, you're a Calvinist,
yes.
And there's a reaction to that. So, I guess in a sense that, I hate to use the word shallowness, but if you have kind of this, well, hey, we just want to be taught what the Bible says, there's a reception to that.
That's what people are all about. They just want to see, are you opening Scriptures and Scripture says that? They'll take it on. But when you begin to package it in these labels, of course, they've been taught anything that doesn't sound familiar. They try to look at it in a different way.
Well, maybe we can circle back around to some of that with the spiritual climate in Uganda, but want to get into now, Godfrey, about one of the things that you're very passionate about, and that is education. Mm-hmm. So you are involved in Homeschoolers Uganda Group,
right,
and also Masters Institute for Education. Mm-hmm. And is there a third one, Homeline Academy? Homeline Academy. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, homeschooling is something that we've talked about before on this podcast. In America here, we have this huge statist government education. I think this has never been seen in the history of humanity, the level to which the state is indoctrinating children. In America, obviously, it's a big nation, and we've never seen to this extent in human history a state-funded, taxpayer-funded, state-run education system. And I think finally a lot of Christians in America are starting to wake up and say, you know what, this is not good. This this is not good. This state-run system is a problem. It's teaching our children morality that is contrary to the Bible.
Right.
So before we get into everything that you're doing over there, what's the climate and the landscape in Uganda with education? I mean, is it state-run? Obviously, we might have a chance later to get into some of the values in Uganda if we get a chance to talk about the anti-homosexuality bill. But just in general with education, is it government-run? And what would you say that the climate of the school, like, would you want to send your children to a government school in Uganda?
I would say in some of these countries in Africa, Uganda inclusive, largely people do not have an understanding of anything different other than the state being in charge of all their lives. That's the predominant understanding, and people have embraced it. People have been made to embrace that and to receive that as the only way. There is no alternative at all. So talking about state-run education system, yeah, to everyone it will be like, what else should it be?
That's how most people are in America too, to be fair.
Everybody will actually, even well-meaning people, they put the government itself on pressure. Come and take charge. Come and be in charge. Why aren't you taking these children to school? Why aren't you giving this and the other? You talk about statism. In Africa, by large, most people are statists. This is a doctrine. This doctrine has been preached there for so many years that statism is the order of the day. By large, it's a culture. So those few people who are coming up to say, well, there should be another way of looking at these things, people like those of us who are coming in from a Reformed Christian biblical perspective, most times, even within the church itself, we are looked at as weird. How can you say government should not be responsible for education? So it takes time to explain to people to begin to see things are right. But again, like I said, most times, especially within the church, if somebody has given you the opportunity for you to open the scriptures and explain these things to them, their eyes go like, oh, now I see the point. So we have a few people who are coming up who are beginning to realize that, okay, there could be another way. And that's why things like homeschooling are picking up slowly by slowly. And that's why we are doing what we are doing through all these programs, Masters Institute for Education, Homeschoolers Uganda Group, and Homeline Academy. My role is to see in all of these things, for me, my mission is to contribute to the discipleship of the nation. And if we are to do that, there is no way you will disciple a nation without teaching it. And you can't teach it with anything else other than the truth of the Word of God. And so all these programs and platforms we are putting together is to make sure that we fill Africa with the knowledge of the Holy One as the waters cover the sea in every sphere, beginning with education. But definitely we want to see everywhere where there is knowledge, because we believe this knowledge, this information will precede the transformation that we are yearning for.
Yeah, amen. You get me excited here about the transformation of Uganda. We need that.
Oh, yes.
We need that same mindset here in America.
We do need it,
and that's definitely what we're struggling with as well. You know, in the churches, people don't. You know, why not send your kids there? Mm-hmm. Real quick, Godfrey. I mean, what do you tell people? You know, your fellow countrymen in Uganda when they say, "Well, why don't I just send my kids to the government school?" What's your quick 30-second response to them to say, "Hey, biblically, that's not a good idea"?
There are many things they can look at. One, usually, excuse me, it's like, I tell people, it's like getting a spade or a hammer and you use it to eat food from the plate. That's the problem. And they're like, what do you mean? You're using a wrong tool. I don't care how much you try to improve it so that it works well. It's the wrong tool altogether. Why don't you pick the right tool? And from there, you begin to show them the problems, which themselves can see. Because it's a wrong tool, it doesn't work. And it doesn't matter how long, it doesn't matter how much we try to fund it, it will never work because it's a wrong tool. Put it down, pick the right tool. Everything God created it and provided the right tools for it. So when it comes to education, let's seek scripture, let's seek God and find out what is it that he has provided. Now, education in Uganda, yes, we can talk about statistics of the products it produces, where people will tell you every year we produce 430 graduates every year from all the institutions of higher learning, and only 30,000 get into the job market.
Okay.
So you show them those kinds of things. Yes, we can talk about in primary school, for example, and secondary school, there is free education today. We call it universal primary and secondary education. And that's what government has provided. But the money the government sends to every school to teach a child is that is 70,000. That's about $20 for a year.
Okay.
That's the amount of money designated for every child in every school. Does it take $20 to educate a child, to provide all the needs the child needs in the school? So even when they are telling us that we are doing it, it does not make sense at all when you look at how much money that is being sent to the schools. So you ask yourself, where does this money come from? It comes from your pockets,
right,
through the taxes you're paying. But does it even go ahead to reach the place where it's supposed to go and do what it's supposed to do? It does not.
Right.
It doesn't work out. So no wonder we have the results that we have, the kind of schools we have.
Yeah.
We are talking about schools where children are studying under trees. You're talking about schools where there's no infrastructure, there are no facilities, the teachers are not happy, so they are only teaching when they can afford, when almost every school year begins with teachers going on strike. So who is losing at the end of the day? It's your child as a parent.
Right. So let's talk about that just briefly here. Because some people in America would say, well, the problem with the American school system is that it's teaching these, transgenderism, homosexuality, it's teaching evolution. And if we could just get the government school system to go back to how it was 60 years ago in America, some people will say this, we need to get prayer back in the government schools. We need the government schools just to teach academics, just focus on arithmetic and math. But it seems like, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're saying in the Ugandan education system, the government run, they may not be teaching all the crazy stuff that we're teaching over here in America, but you still think that's not the solution. Because some Americans are going to say, well, what we need to do, Chris, is we need to reform the government school system. But what you're saying is, no, we need to get education out of the hands of the government, yes, and back in the family.
It's a wrong tool.
Right.
You will be trying to say, let me change this hammer and maybe let's make it a little smoother, then we can be able to eat with it instead of picking a fork. No. So in Uganda, in America, yes, people can talk about that, well, if we get the schools to do the right things, or back to when they were in the 60s, maybe they were teaching better doctrines and what have you, and they are better resourced. For us, it's both. They are not well resourced in terms of facilities and everything. Teachers are not well paid. There are no textbooks. Most of those things that are needed are not there in the government schools. I mean, I'm talking about schools where the government officials, this is one thing, it's a bit of sarcasm, but one thing I've always provided as a solution that, well, if government schools are doing the best job, or they should be, and they should be funded by government, let's have a law that every civil servant, every person who works for government, their child must be in the government school.
Right.
Or else they quit the job.
Right.
If we did that, then we'll see what will happen. Yeah. Why am I saying that? None of their children are in these schools. Okay. They who claim to support these school systems.
Right.
So the thing is that it's not working, not well resourced, but on the results that are coming out of it are not the right results we are supposed to have. And the reason all of that is happening is because it's the wrong tool. Now, I said that both things are happening. Even doctrine-wise, in terms of the information, the gender, the transgender system and what have you you're talking about, it's creeping in. Because when it comes to our curriculum, the government takes over everything. It's not necessarily designed and written by the nationals. There are always experts who come from the United Nations through UNESCO and what have you. They provide the funds, so to speak, to write and to review curricula, and as a result, they provide the expertise in terms of the personnel who come with their knowledge, who come with their values, who come with their doctrines. So you cannot even guarantee that we are in charge of what is taught to the kids in those schools. I'm a teacher. I've looked through textbooks. We've always caught textbooks that have transgenderism in them.
You're finding those in Uganda?
Textbooks in Ugandan textbooks. And I'm a teacher. I have a background in education, so I'm familiar in that. I work with school teachers. So I'm familiar with what they are teaching and which subjects are out there. Parents are not aware of some of these things that are happening. But things are happening. Even when we're in schools, there are different topics and in different subjects. So sexuality is a big topic in many subjects. It's taught to us in science. They'll teach it to you in divinity. They'll teach it to you even in English language. They will craft it within the stories that are being crafted, within the poems and all of that. And those places are the places which parents do not even look at. For instance, in the recent years, there was the comprehensive sexuality education, which was being paraded around, and the parents rose up against it. And I was telling parents, we are looking at comprehensive sexuality education. It is, yes, bad, but there is no slot in any school where they will tell you that now we are going to teach comprehensive sexuality education. But where is sexuality taught traditionally? In science, in biology.
Right.
We are not paying attention to that content there. In divinity, ironically, there's a subject on divinity where
Uganda teaches divinity in their government schools.
Yes, and there's a topic sexuality, but this is not the divinity you'd want to hear.
Right.
So we have to have our eyes open, because many times it's possible for someone to. There's somebody who told me a story one time that if you are ever in a place and you see everybody running somewhere at a certain spot, like they are running after somebody or a thief, don't go there. Instead, go to the bank.
Right.
If you want to guard the situation, go to the bank.
Right.
In this case, they throw in a comprehensive sexuality education, and all the clergy, all the parents, because they know the culture of people in Ugandans, would run towards that. But biology is going, and as it goes, all these ideologies are creeping in through that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very refreshing to hear. It's refreshing to hear you say that, because, look, the solution is not government education, because there's many Christians in America that still think, well, we're going to solve this by reclaiming the government schools, and we have the funding. I mean, it's stolen via taxation, but we have that here. We have the nice buildings. And you're saying, I mean, I guess if you in Uganda, you're like, look, don't go that route. It's just going to cost us more money.
Yes. And
in the end, it's not where education should take place. So let's talk about what you do with the homeschooling there in Uganda. Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me what the reception's been. Have you been able to get people that are pulling their kids out of the government schools? Are you trying to kind of convince them to do so? Are there people that have already done it and you're trying to help them now educate their children? What's the state of homeschooling in Uganda, and what are you up to over there in regards to that?
I'm just checking here our homeschool group. I'm just checking our homeschool group here, the WhatsApp group. Right now, you can see 319 participants. That is HUG, Homeschoolers Uganda Group.
Okay, so these are 319 theoretically families or parents?
Families. These
Okay.
are parents
Okay.
who are homeschooling their children.
Across the nation of Uganda.
Across, yes, pretty much the nation. But this is not the only group. HUG is not the only group that brings them together. There is another group that brings others together who are using they come together because of a curriculum they're using. In others, we say if you count here 300 and maybe another group has about 300, there could be about maybe we are coming to about 1,000 families that are homeschooling in Uganda.
Okay, so it's a small portion.
It's a very small portion compared to places like here.
Yeah, and it wasn't, I mean, I don't know the full history of homeschooling in America, but I know it got a resurgence with Rushdoony in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
There's definitely way more now than there were, I guess, 60 years ago in America.
We are where America was in those years. It's just a few people, a few voices coming up that there is such a thing. It still sounds like a new concept in the country in the ears of many. COVID-19 has also came in as an opportunity for people to hear the word, because during COVID, even government officials, they were using the terminology homeschool, encouraging people to homeschool their children. And we're getting calls left and right, people asking, what is this? What's it about? So we appeared severally in the papers. I featured several times on national TV to talk about it. And so as a result, we are at that place of just disseminating information, sensitizing people, telling people there's another way. There can't be only one way. You can do it differently. And here we are. People have done it. We have a few graduates who have graduated from high school and have been homeschooled. There may not be more than 20 of them, but the few of them we can count on and say, well, so-and-so's son did it.
Yeah.
And here they are in society serving.
So you're in at the ground level of the homeschooling movement in Uganda.
It is right at the ground.
This is like Rushdoony back in the 80s in America. You're starting it out here. So maybe 50 years from now they'll look back and say,
Lord willing,
Godfrey started this movement.
Lord willing, we would love in 50 years to see resources available in the country. That's why part of what I'm involved in with all these programs you've mentioned is to provide resources, to get resources in the country in terms of curriculum, in terms of everything that a parent needs to make it possible for them to homeschool. That's what we are building, such infrastructure.
Yeah, yeah. Where in Uganda do you live? What part of the country?
I live in Kampala, the capital.
The capital. Okay, that's southern. I got a map here. That's southern Uganda, almost on the shores, if you will, of Lake Victoria. So you're not far from there. Okay, so just give me what do you do for the homeschoolers? What are you trying to equip parents to do over there? Because I mean, again, people are going to say the perspective of so many in America is like, oh well, the problem with these other nations is they need the education that we have here, and you're saying no, the family needs to be instructing their children. So I will say, Godfrey, I mean, there's a lot of people here in America that are like they're intimidated by homeschooling. They're saying I can't do this. I'm not qualified. I'm not able to teach my children. I guess I want to start by asking you, what is the purpose of education?
The purpose of education is to disciple the nation, to educate the nation, so the nation is knowledgeable. Knowledge about what? About life, how to do life, how to live. Look at it that we are in this world as strangers. God creates Adam, he puts him in the garden, and is like, I'm not just going to leave you there. God comes in and educates Adam. He gave him instructions. You may not find the word education in the Bible, but words like instruction will be there. God gave him instruction. What was the purpose of that instruction to Adam? This is how you're going to make it here. This is my father's world. This is our father's world. And so what our father did, he put Adam, the first man in this world, he had to educate him about it. You do this, you won't do this. All for your good, for you to live here successfully, you've got to follow my instructions.
Right.
And that's what education is about, to teach a person how to do life in this world and even beyond God's way.
Yeah. And that starting there is so fundamentally different. So fundamentally different than the typical mindset of education. Well, it's to learn facts. It's to learn information. It's to learn, and those things can be important, but they're not the foundation. No. Because I would say, and I would agree with you, and you basically said it, how to live. And I would just say it's education should be how to teach you to love God and love neighbor. And you've hit on
That's
it there. Like if you don't have the character, which is God telling you, here's how to live, here's what to do, here's what not to do,
Right.
you won't have anything else. So I think that's very important for people to understand. Like if you want to educate your children, if you want your children to be educated, the most important thing is for them to learn Christian character.
Oh, yes.
And if you hand them over to someone else, you've given up your responsibility to do that. So that's one thing I always try to impress upon people is, look, yeah, there's certain subjects maybe someone else could teach them better than you could.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a way you can get some help on that.
Yeah.
But there's no end to the amount of information. Like you'll never have an education that covers all the information. It's impossible. So what matters is teaching them godly character, how to live in this world, as you said. So what are some of the obstacles, though, that you come across with parents who say, I'm not sure if I can do this.
Yeah.
Help me do this. Like, what do I do? I'm not qualified. What are some things that you say to that?
Our society has been made to believe the life happens out there, not in the home. There used to be a saying that east to west, home is best.
Okay.
I wonder whether that saying is still true. Because our society, especially the urbanized society in Kampala where I live, which is becoming common in all over Africa, so many of these places are becoming urbanized, is a lifestyle of mom and dad and children get up very early in the morning and leave home. Go somewhere else. That's where life happens.
The kids go to school.
Kids are ferried to these institutions, schools. The mom is off to where she works.
So the mom is not staying home raising the children.
No, that's a very foreign concept.
I mean, did that change with, like, when did that develop in Uganda? Was it different in the past?
Yes.
Okay.
It was different. It's this education
Okay.
which people are following.
Right. Same thing in America.
Which
yeah.
has taught moms that actually to stay home, it is belittling, it is not of value. To raise children is not of value. Such lies have been pumped into the heads of many women that actually suggesting it, if you're not yet married, you risk losing getting a wife. Meaning that if you want to court somebody,
right,
you've got to speak the politically correct narrative where the woman has to be given the freedom to go and work in the corporate world out there and all of those kinds of things. All of which are it's ill information given to people. So that's the biggest challenge, because you talk about homeschooling and someone who will realize, oh, that means one of us at least should be stay home.
right.
And you're like, oh, yes. And they're like, how can it be? One, of course, they would ask you things like, how do we survive? We make ends meet from both paychecks of mom and dad. And there's a sense in which you would understand that. But all of it is because the foundation has been destroyed. People have been made to think that you cannot actually make ends meet at home. The concept of family economics has been destroyed. People don't think they can work from home. People don't think that even what the things they are doing out there where they are going, those things in the first place, they could have been at home. You could have spent time investing and developing and building your family economy so well that within that there's even the education of the children, so well that you become such a valuable family in society and in community. But the same talent and values and disciplines and time that we are giving to the corporate world, that time which we should have given to our family, that's what is going to happen. I mean, when time comes for you for retirement, the corporate world will send you back home where you invested nothing.
Right.
For me, it's what I tell people, that same time and talent and values, we can spend and invest it in building your family economy instead of building someone else's economy who may not remember you when that time comes for retirement.
Yeah.
The Bible talks about a righteous man leaving an inheritance to his children and children's children. You can never leave a job to your children as an inheritance. You can't hand it to somebody if all you invested in with was a job where you're working for somebody. But if you invested in your family and built something as a family enterprise, you can pass it on to children. And education is best that way, where work and education are very well integrated, in that the children are studying at the same time. They are integrated. Whatever they are doing is integrated within the work that is being done as a family.
Yeah, that's a great vision, a great model. So, are you working on, as far as materials? I know you were telling me earlier you're trying to produce some more. Do you have some? What kind of resources do you recommend to people in Uganda as far as helping them? If they say, what do I do here? Let's say they say, okay, look, I got the big picture, Godfrey. The mother's gonna stay home with the children. We're gonna work to do that. Now, what do I do? Now, how do I teach my own kids? I've always sent them to the government schools. Where do I begin?
We've recommended resources, the ones we know of here, most of them from here. We've tried over the years to see that we take resources to people closer home, but shipping things like books is very difficult. So families, we give them ideas on how they can ship books. Maybe you have a friend who is traveling, ship them there and they bring them to you. But one of the things we are doing now is to build a resource center whereby we have a place where these resources can be found. And in this resource center, one of the major things we are putting there is a printer, so we can be able to print them locally.
Okay.
There are a few publishers here with whom we are in talks that in case we got this printer, they would give us permission to print their materials back home, so that at least we alleviate the problem of shipping them. So those are some of the things we are doing, but also we are working because of that problem of that most of the resources were here that people needed. The ones which were biblically integrated, at least at the moment, it gave us a vision that long-term, Lord willing, would love to develop our own materials,
okay,
which are biblically integrated but within the local context. So it's one of the things we've been working on over the years. About 2 years ago, we were able to publish what you would call the Ugandan primary school curriculum, which the kind they use even in the school system. But this
so are
one,
they using your stuff in the schools?
Some schools
are using your curriculum.
Private Christian schools are
Okay.
using it because it's biblically integrated.
Yeah.
So they are using our math, our science, our social studies, and our languages.
I got a few more questions about that. So first of all, what's the main language in Uganda?
Over 52 tribes, each tribe with its own language. So because of that, we don't have a national language, so to speak, but we have what we call an official language, which is English.
Okay. So how many languages do you speak?
I personally, about maybe 6.
6. Are most of them tribal languages?
Yes. So if your tribe, like you said, where Kampala is located, so every 150 or 200 kilometers you drive outside of Kampala, you'll be in a new territory which will be speaking a different tribe. So those tribes, neighboring tribes, you tend to rub shoulders with those, so you tend to catch up on them easily.
Okay. I'll say this is for the audience, but it's more for me. Can you say something in one of those tribal languages?
Holiotia.
What does that mean?
Those who know it have understood. Basically, how are you? How are you doing? That's Luganda.
How do you say it again?
Oli.
Otia.
So you say it fast. Exactly.
Oliota.
How are you doing?
Okay.
And then I would say it in a different language. It would be Akodeo.
Akodeo.
So Kodeo is a neighboring tribe that will also say that way, saying, how are you doing? Another one would be like, there are various ways of putting it.
Yeah.
Molije, are you okay? That's another tribe. Or there are so many.
Yeah.
There are
Well,
so many.
so you know about five or six or so tribes.
Yeah,
crazy.
about 6 tribes that
Okay.
they can speak. I may not be fluent, but I hear everything they say.
Here. So, but all the curriculum that you're going to work on is going to be in English.
It's English. English is the official language,
Yeah.
so it's the language of instruction in schools.
Okay. The private Christian schools. Just real quick, my perspective, Godfrey, is obviously I think private school is a better option than the government school, and I think it's a legitimate option. I think you could defend biblically sending your children to a tutor who's going to honor the Lord. But I still think the homeschooling is the best method. I just think for so many reasons personally that one, just the cost.
Right.
I mean, it's much more. I don't know how it is in Uganda, but for me in America with 5 children, it's much more affordable for me to homeschool than to send my 5 kids to a private Christian school. Even with my wife at home, I mean, if we had her, I wouldn't want her working outside the home, but if we did that, I still don't even know if I'd be able to afford. I mean, all that money would simply go to 5 kids in a private school, which I don't want that. I want them in the home. So I think you talk about a vision for Uganda, and I really do believe that it has to go back to the home. I think there could be a place for, co-ops or certain things, but I'm not a big fan of the common school method, if you will, where you send the kids away for 7-8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that's what the private school, at least in America, typically is. I'm just not a fan of it. So again, I'm not trying to bash the private Christian schools. I'm just saying I think the biblical solution is home based.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you can't do stuff outside the home. Doesn't mean you couldn't send your child to a tutor. But that's got to be the central thing. Would you agree with that? And would you say that's that the private school in Uganda it's a good option, but it's not maybe the long-term solution?
The private schools in Uganda are not. When you hear school being private, it doesn't mean so much. I mean, you don't expect much difference between it and the public school.
Okay.
It's only private that Chris somewhere in the United States met Godfrey. They got a passion for education. So like, okay, what can we do in Uganda? I go to Uganda because I'm Ugandan. We put together funds. I buy a piece of land. I put on infrastructure. We pay our teachers. We collect money as tuition from the learners. But the curriculum is given to us by government. The teachers must be government certified, who are trained by the government.
That's the law. That's in Uganda. The private schools have to follow this.
To register a school,
Okay.
government must allow it, and these are the qualifications you must meet. You teach this curriculum. You hire these teachers who we have trained, who are certified. So it's not in software. It is private that you have put together the physical infrastructure.
Okay. It doesn't seem to be much payoff there.
Yes. So that's why I'm saying it doesn't mean so much. People don't have an understanding of private schools or government schools.
Yeah.
All schools are the same over there.
Okay. Now, yeah, and so that's even more over there. You don't want to go that route. Here, I think you do have the private schools have a lot of freedom, but I still don't think they're ideal.
Yeah, the private school I would advocate for if it is a school, and I agree with you. Everything, education, the right tool, education belongs in the home. It must be home-based, home-based, family-based, parent-led, and private. Those are the 3 pillars, even when we're talking about homeschooling. The 4 pillars we're operating on. It is home-based, parent-led, private, and Christian. We added that on. It has to be Christian education.
Amen.
Now, God did not place a home in isolation. Every home is in a community. And this community could be, let's say, a local church. That these families that are gathering in this local church are in charge, part of discipling their children, which is taught to them by their pastors, the church leaders. They are teaching these parents, it's your responsibility to disciple your children, and here are the tools we are giving you. This same church can also make an arrangement that, well, okay, all the families in this home are not in the same place. This family here when they have an issue, this is what you can do to help one another. So there could be a setup by the local church that the parents can collect resources and help and support one another. That's the kind of school that I would advocate for, that is equally local, very church-based, because the church is a place where these families come to associate with each other voluntarily. In such a context, I'll be fine with it. They could even agree, well, our children will come here maybe once a week for such and such a lesson or such and such an activity, and these are the days They're at home, they're doing this and the other with the parents. That kind of a situation.
Yeah, where the church is very involved.
Church is very involved
Yeah.
to support the
Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
to make sure that together as a body, collectively, at that local level, they raise their children in a godly way.
Yeah, that's a great vision, and that's something I've been thinking about here in the States. I mean, we need the churches to come back. In some ways, they say, well, we support this private school. But I think what you're saying is the much better model. The churches the pastors need to be teaching the parents, hey, your job is to teach your children. Like when you have like when St. Patrick went over to Ireland, like you had all these pagan priests that were teaching the people, and he's not going to be like, well, yeah, they can teach your kids. No, your job is to teach your kids. Let me as a Christian minister help and equip you to do that. It's your job, but I'm going to try to help you. And the church could really be a great resource center for that.
That's the Ephesians 4:11 model. The role of the pastors, teachers, evangelists, apostles, and what have you was to equip the saints to do ministry. This is a ministry of the family, of every family. But we get the equipment from our church leaders so that we go and do it.
Yeah. Well, is there anywhere people can find information about what you're doing in Uganda? Is there a website or anything like that?
Yes, I've put together a website. We've gone through different challenges occasionally here and there, but sometimes people have not found much information there. So right now there's even MIE, www.mieuganda.com is still there.
Okay.
And then also www.homescholersugandagroup.org.
Okay. I'll try to put those in the description.
Yes.
I'll try to find them.
Even the Homeline Academy, I have homelineacademy.com. Can find information there too.
Okay. Well, we have a few more minutes left, and Godfrey, if you're definitely our listeners, I think would be interested. I know I would be interested in just hearing a little bit from you about what's going on in Uganda more broadly. As a Christian in Uganda, we look at what's happening in Uganda as Christians, and on this show we've talked about the Anti-Homosexuality Act. Mm-hmm. And in America, Reformed Christians are looking and seeing, well, this is what's going on here. We have sodomy being celebrated in the streets. We have children being operated on with these transgender surgeries. Yeah. We have, obviously a slew of issues with the marriage, the definition of marriage. So some of us look over there to Uganda and say, well, this Anti-Homosexuality Act, just one on the face of it saying we don't want that in our nation. We don't want the open celebration of sodomy in our nation. And we look at that and say, biblically, that's good. And of course, there's some controversy with the penalties. I mean, on this podcast, we believe in God's law. We don't think there is anything wrong. And in fact, we think it is good that if you did have an actual homosexual act with witnesses, it could be a capital offense. Mm-hmm. But just share your perspective, because you are Ugandan, you live in Uganda, and you were telling me some things earlier before we went on air here that maybe this act, this law, it was not necessary, or it came at the wrong time, or for the wrong motive. So maybe just kind of try to summarize what your reaction has been to the Anti-Homosexuality Act and really the worldwide attention that it has brought to Uganda, in a sense.
I think Paul tells us when he's writing to in one of his letters, he writes and says, the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. And I think it was to the Galatians, and he was addressing the whole issue of legalism. And says, the letter kills, the Spirit gives life. That if you get a law and you only look at the letter of the law, and you don't factor in the Spirit that gave rise to this law, you're most likely going to look at these things differently. Something will be skewed. You'll not look at it straight. It's like, I gave an example the other day, the other day I was driving, and then I had not moved with my driving permit, the physical driving permit. And when the cop stopped me, I looked up one which is I scanned it and I have it on my phone, and I showed it to him, and he insisted that all he wanted was the physical one. And I was like, what's the difference? I didn't carry it with me, and those things happen that you didn't carry it. And I was like, what exactly is he looking for? He's trying to carry the letter of the law and is ignoring the spirit. Now, why am I saying that? Every law in every society, before it was written on the books of their laws, there was a context, there was a situation, there was a reason that gave rationale to the crafting of that law. Now, this law in Uganda, when I look at the rationale behind it, the motives behind it, are not the motives that indeed are there for Uganda or Uganda as a society. In America, I hear your situation, talking about parades and all this celebration that is going on of evil and what have you. It is out there in the public domain. There's a law. There's need for a law because there's that context and that situation. But Uganda has always had a law, a general law against what we call deviant sexual behavior.
Okay, so you're saying there already was a law in place.
There's a law in place.
Okay.
A law in place against deviant sexual behavior, bestiality, including homosexuality and all of that. And there was no uproar of any sort. Nobody ever came up. But this particular one, and it's not the first time, because you remember a few years ago, the same bill came up and it went all the way through Parliament, and the president ascended his signature on it, and it rose an uproar from all over the world, and the president and even some Ugandans at the same time went to court, appealed, and the court, and it was won. And the law was overturned.
Was it very similar to the one now?
There's not much difference.
Okay.
This was just a comeback. They just brought it back again.
Do you think it'll go to the courts again?
It is already in courts.
Okay.
And for me, this is where I've always told people that this is a very tricky situation. Because when you look at the laws, following the laws, most times the laws are already in their favor. And once it's struck down in the courts of the law, let's say the Supreme Court, it is given precedence.
So you're saying that it would have been better to keep the laws that they had in Uganda that already, you said, it outlawed bestiality, homosexuality. And you're saying now, with the timing of this law, just looking at it from that perspective, the timing of this law, and even the other one a few years ago, when you send it to the Supreme Court of Uganda, and allowing them to strike it down, it may overturn those other laws that you had.
Because once it's overturned, now it becomes legal, what you were trying to make illegal.
Okay.
So now tomorrow they will come to your church and tell you have to wed us. They will come and do a parade. Why shouldn't they? Well, the Constitution Court overruled that now we are legal. Before, there was no noise, there was no platform, there was no precedent for them to even do any of those things.
Okay.
So it's a very tricky situation that personally I was like, there was no need for it.
Well, it's tricky too.
It was already taken care of.
Well, it's tricky too because you have all these other layers that we talk about a lot on the show. You have the Supreme Courts, and they can then essentially make law. At least in America, that's the way that the perception is. And I would argue it's a good law that God has given us regarding criminalizing homosexual acts. It's a good law. But to your point, Godfrey, I guess I would say in a statist system, which I would say America is, and it seems like Uganda is too, when you have all these apparatuses and these layers that aren't in the Bible, and I would say they're added, and I would say even the Supreme Court system here in America, I wouldn't say it's a good thing because we've given the opportunity now for a select few to basically make law. Yeah. So to your point, it seems like what you're saying is it may backfire in the current context of Uganda politics.
That's my fear, that is going to fuel what had no fuel before. Everybody knows, by and large, and that's why the forces, whichever forces they are trying so hard, because everyone knows in Uganda, not just the church, but the culture by and large is against homosexuality. It's not common. It's not common. I mean, I have never seen one who I can say this one is. I have never. So,
And you live in a big city there. And
I live in Kampala.
yeah.
So, apart from the ones we hear are when these laws come up, and then there are people in the media, then they tell you, and then you hear them after they have left the country, they are in other countries, then they say, oh, well, I ran away because I was this and the other. That's what they tell us. And that way, I mean, you will have to understand and appreciate where Uganda is. You have actually to be in the country to understand some of these things.
Sure.
But I'll tell you, today, so many people in Africa really would love to be in America. They would love to be in Canada. They would love to be in the UK. They would love to be in these countries.
Why?
And they've always tried to do everything. They've tried to come here illegally, and as well because these countries have made it so difficult for people to come for good reasons in these countries.
Let me stop you there. Why do they want to come?
Greener pasture.
Okay.
The grass is greener here.
Yeah.
America, you have so many things you're saying that have gone bad, granted. But I want to tell you as an outsider, when I come here, you still have so much that is doing well, that is working well. And the foundation which built this country still holds a lot of things in great perspective.
Yeah.
That everyone all over the world would love to come here.
Yeah.
And do life here, live here, and all of that. Now, because of the restrictions that are there, that many people cannot come here, so people are doing everything they can. If it means to come and I say I was gay and I was being persecuted, and that's the reason for which you give me papers,
Right.
I'll do it.
So
And
you're
you
saying-
have so many now who are coming in purporting to be when they're not.
Because of this Anti-Homosexuality Act in Uganda, you're saying now people will come to America theoretically and say, well, I've been persecuted in Uganda. You got to let me in.
Oh yeah, that's a common reason now.
And they're not even homosexuals.
They're not.
Okay.
They're not.
Yeah, you're right, Godfrey. I mean, and we talk about that often, that it's the Christian heritage of America that we are still borrowing from. Our concern over here is simply that how long can that last when you are systematically eroding the foundation? But to your point, yeah, there's still so much blessing that God has given us because of that heritage, but we're spurning it. Well, let me just ask you this though. So why do you think the bill then came forward when it did? Like, why do you think, what was behind it? Do you think it was a good motive? Like, do you think some of the Ugandans were like actually concerned that the transgenderism, I mean, that's what some of the parliamentarians were saying. They're like, we don't want this in our nation. Why do you think the bill came forward if you're saying that they already had the laws? Was it a good motive, at least from the parliament, saying we want to protect Uganda from becoming like the United States in this regard? Or was it ill motives? That, like, why do you think the bill came forward in the first place?
You said personally. I may not be the final person on this, but I think always there's politics behind these subjects. There's politics at play. The country is at a point where we've had the same president for the last 40-something years.
Oh, really? Wow.
He's going to make, I think, 45 years in office by end of this term, or 40 years. Now, if you've had one president for the last 40 years, that will tell you there's a growing opposition group as well in the country.
Yeah.
Now, both of these groups have international people who are interested in both of them. So they will use both against the other the way they want. So one of the opposition groups in the country, one of the labels that have been put upon them by the ruling government is they are being supported by the West. So and if you want to convince the nationals that someone is so bad, tell them he's gay or he's associated to the gay. They are the ones funding him, they are the ones supporting him, and all of that. And immediately it came out. All the attention went to these opposition leaders, asking them, give us your say. What are you saying about this? To catch them on the wrong side of the narrative.
Okay.
So it's politics at play. And the bad thing is that the nationals will just suffer within the mix of just these few people, politicians up there, who are trying to fight their own battles.
Yeah.
So I cannot rule out that there was no politics, of course, which as well spans global trends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, an argument to end all these man-made systems of government and just go back to God's system, God's law and local judges. Get Luke Saint's book, The Sound Doctrine of Theocracy, for more on that. And do you have a copy of Luke Saint's book, The Sound Doctrine of Theocracy?
No, I'll definitely need
we'll have to get you one.
Yes.
I'll see if we can get you one. Anything else you want to say, Godfrey? Any message you have to Americans that you would like to share as an outsider, or any final word about anything, education, Uganda, whatever's on your heart?
Yeah. I think there is still the 7,000 of God's prophets, God's well-meaning people, well-intended people in America. There is still that 7,000. We can still identify it in many ways, in many situations and circumstances in this country, that we can still rely on, and possibly to provide support in Africa, such support that can build a reservoir or a reserve that will, in the event that things have overturned here, that will come and support.
So we can move to Uganda if things go bad here?
Not to move.
I mean,
but
I thought about it.
The gospel, for example, God forbid, but there may come a time in this country when things continue the way they are, that you cannot mention the name Christ, that you cannot even send missionaries to Africa, you cannot even send support in terms of money and what have you to Africa or any other country. And because of that, I've been sharing this with a mission group. I was part of a meeting recently, and this missions group was discussing how do we support churches in Africa.
Yeah.
And I was saddened, but at the same time, in that sadness, the Lord has given me what I would call a message that I've been trying to share with the church in the West. Granted, the church in Africa and many other places has been supported by the church here in the West for so many years. But I think the model must change. The model of how the church in Africa has been supported. In this meeting where I was, much of the discussion was on how do we support the church. But when it comes to supporting the church, they are supporting causes of church planting, and they support a church planter. For instance, I plant a church in Uganda. I'm given a salary for 5 years, and after 5 years, there's
salary from the West.
From the West. Okay. And after those 5 years, so that I can do the work, mobilize, plant a church, make it established, and what have you. And after the 5 years, the assumption is I'll be self-sustaining, and then they can stop giving me the funds. It has not worked anywhere. It has been tried to do that. So I was like, okay, how is the church in the West being supported? Where do you who come to support us, where do you get your monies from? And the answer is churches. And not churches, but individual church members. People who attend churches here in America, they have learned that it's their duty to do ministry or to support it. And as a result, people give to the work of ministry. That's the model, I believe, which is biblical. In Ephesians 4:11, where Paul says, equip the saints to do the work of ministry. And so, why shouldn't we focus on support the local church members along with their minister? This minister, yes, to equip them, but there must be efforts to equip these local members, the primarily local members he has worked with, to come to that level where they are able to support their minister and the ministries.
So you're saying the people in Uganda need to be able to support the work themselves? Is that like
the church in Uganda?
Yeah.
It is the people who must support it.
Right. And you're not seeing that happen.
We have not invested as missionaries. I've been talking to missionaries for many years, telling them, teach us how you have done ministry. we need to teach the people who should do the ministry. And who are those? The local saints.
Right.
Teach them, how do you do ministry? How do you support it? They will tell you, I'm poor. I don't earn anything. So how do we help you to get out of poverty? How do we equip your hands to get a job, to get market for your produces, to do all those kinds of things? Because if we have church members, 10, 20, 30 of them in this church who are able to earn their own living, and we have taught them to give towards the ministry, that church will be self-supported and it will be self-sustaining with time.
Yeah.
But if you only have the person of a pastor, the minister, who is able to meet his own needs, he's the one who is able to drive a car. He's the only one who earns a big salary in this church, and his members don't know where he even gets the money from.
Doesn't seem like a good situation.
So all of them, the members, will come to the church to look for help from him.
I want a handout, yeah.
Instead of supporting him to do the ministry or to do it with him.
Okay.
We need to find a way of how do we change it so that it is from the ground up instead of a top down, which is only missionaries and missions.
And funding coming from outside.
Yeah, the funding from outside actually comes to missionaries.
Yeah.
And when it comes locally, in the example of a church planting, it is to the church planter. That's where it ends.
Yeah.
To him and his family. Now, the people, the locals who are coming to attend his church, he never even invests much effort to teach them to do this, to support the ministry.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's definitely a need. I know we've talked to another gentleman in here who is he's from South Africa, but he's up north, Angola area, I think. And then Joel Saint, of course, just went over with Luke to the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
When was that?
Oh, that was only a month or two ago.
Ah,
yeah.
That's not far from where
They should have told you. You didn't know about it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to talk to them about that. But yeah, one of the big things they talked with them over there, this was with like political candidates. Don't take money from the West. Don't rely on the West. You need to be able to do it yourself. And that's kind of what you're saying in regards to the church.
The money is, we can work out something very practical, that we need the support. But what is this support coming to do? It must be very strategic.
Right. Not just throwing the money here.
Don't just throw it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Throw it strategically. Because if you look, for instance, if I'm a church planter and you say, well, everything begins with planning, and I have my strategic plan that, okay, in 5 years, the plan is we must be self-supported, self-sufficient and all of that locally, that, okay, what does it take? It takes 10 millions per month for me to do that. And you show us the plan, and in the plan, everything is geared towards supporting the locals, the church members, to be able to earn their living, be able to support their families, and that way they are able even to support the ministry. And in your strategic plan, there is all of that, because I believe that's part of ministry. The ministry you're doing to the people should enable them even to be self-supported as families. Why should they stay impoverished when you're doing ministry among them? Which kind of ministry is that? So we should do ministry to them, do the teachings to them, give them the knowledge, bring them the whatever else is needed to make sure that they are such able, equipped church members who have ability to at least do the tithing. So if we have the strategic plan that is 10 millions this year, will enable me to do that. Okay, as a partner in the US, you could say, we'll give you the 10 millions the first year. But when you do the ministry, as you have planned it the first year, a proof that you have done this ministry, the second year will give you 8 millions, because the 2 will come from the people you have equipped. They now have the ability to give at least 2. And the third year will give you 6, 4, 2, until when we can give nothing, because your members are equipped with this plan we have put together, which we've supported you on. Now they are able. Now that they are able to raise the 10 millions that you need to run your ministry, it means the locals are running that ministry. It's time to give birth to another church. Let's transfer these 10 millions to another church.
Yeah.
And we replicate the model like that.
Yeah. Well, a lot there. There's a lot we could talk about. Next time you're in the States, you have to come back.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll continue this conversation because we're going to have to wrap up here.
I definitely enjoy members of this community in these circles, and I look forward to every opportunity I could have.
Well, so Godfrey Kyazze, right?
Yes.
Godfrey Kyazze. I'm going to try to put those links in the description to the various groups and ministries you're involved in there. And pray for Godfrey over in Uganda and what he's doing there, and pray for the homeschooling movement in Uganda, that people would see, you know what, the state is not the one that should be educating our children. So for more information about the Lancaster Patriot, go to thelancasterpatriot.com. I would also encourage you, if you appreciate what we're doing, want to support the work, go to patreon.com/the Lancaster Patriot, and you will get access to some bonus content that is only for patrons. So until next time, remember, Christ, not man, is king. So long.